Welcome to the Paranormal M experience, where we unveil stories that defy explanation. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, perhaps even drop a comment to help us along with this algorithm, and it'll also put you in the forefront of our latest cryptic tales. We hope you're ready for a captivating exploration. The ghost sighting that made me a believer. This incident occurred sometime in 1982, before I joined the U.S. Air Force. Around 1982, I was in college, and we were living in a rented bottom apartment in this is hard to say. It's a city in the Philippines, so bear with me. Baguio City. We had one bathroom near the entranceway. My bed was facing the door, which faced down the hallway where the bathroom is. On occasion, I would get up in the middle of the night and use the bathroom, and this night was one of those nights. Just as I was about to get up and go to the bathroom, I see my mom in her nightgown pass by my door. She goes down the hallway to the bathroom. I was sure it was my mom because it looked like the nightgown that she wears, and she had short hair exactly like my mom's. I didn't see the face, only the back of her head. My first thought was, oh great, I gotta pee and now I gotta wait for Mom. After a few minutes, Mom had not left the bathroom, and I was getting impatient because I had to pee. Finally, I called out, Mom, can you hurry it up? I gotta go pee. No response. I called out again and still no response. Just great. So, I got up and walked down the hallway to the bathroom and saw that the bathroom door was open. I ask, Mom, you there? You okay? No response. I open the door and no one is in there at all. I'm confused at this point because there's no way that she could have left the bathroom and gone back to bed without me seeing. And I'm also freaked out, but I still have to go pee. I go back to bed and can't get back to sleep. I asked my mom in the morning if she had gone to the bathroom last night. She said that she didn't. I later found out that the owner's niece had killed herself upstairs, and they showed me her picture, and it looked exactly like the figure I had seen. But this wasn't the only incident to happen in that house. One night I was woken by 3 loud steps on the side of the dresser that was next to my bed. I mean, they were loud slaps. I was confused. This was before I had the sighting. I tried to replicate how hard you'd have to slap the dresser to get that sound. I found out that I had to slap that dresser very hard to replicate the slaps that happened literally a few inches from my head. The only other incident also happened while I was in college. I was taking engineering and I was working on my plate for my mechanical drawing class. It was late at night, but I was busy, and for some reason I looked up from my drawing to look at a shoe in front of me on the floor. The shoe suddenly moved by itself across the floor about 4 feet. I freaked out and ran out of the bathroom. I didn't bother finishing my project. Crap. But those were the only 3 incidents that I can remember from that house. Years later, my brother and sister would tell me that they would hear footsteps in the kitchen as well. Story number 2. Coworker and I saw a ghost in daylight. This occurred around 1990 at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, while I was stationed there as a radio operator. I worked in the building 829 high-frequency receiver site. The building was surrounded by the antenna field, so it was clear all around. It was located about a mile off the main road. Not everyone had cars back then, and many people just took the base shuttle bus and walked down the road to the building. It was not uncommon to see people walking up and down the road during shift change. I picked up my friend Derek from off base, since we were both living off base at the time. It was around 18-15 hours, and we were halfway down the road heading towards the receiver site. Usually, if I saw someone walking toward the building, I'd give them a lift the rest of the way in. So here we were, driving on that road, not full daylight, but you could still see everything. There was no grass tall enough to hide someone. As I'm driving, I see a person walking toward the building, so I think to myself that I would give this guy a lift. I could see the person pretty well. It was just a male wearing a white shirt and blue jeans. As the car gets within 50 feet, the person simply vanishes in front of my eyes. I was too shocked to say anything, and I was not about to say anything to my friend in the passenger seat. Then Derek says, "Did you see that? Where did that guy go?" I responded, "Yeah, I did. I wasn't going to say anything, though." So I stopped the car and we both got out to see where the guy went. Nothing. There was no one else but us, and no one else walking down the road at all. We got back in the car and drove into work. Later on, I kept saying that we saw a ghost, but Derek refused to admit it. He would only say that he saw something, but would not say that it was a ghost. That was my only visual sighting at Clark, but there was another unexplainable incident that happened in that building. Story number 3, The Whisper. A little bit of background story about me. I don't like people touching me, hugging me, or sometimes going into people's houses. Why? Well, when people touch me, I feel things that I can't describe in words. I feel that they did something bad, like they got into a really bad fight or even worse. When a guy has done something bad to a girl, use your imagination there. So when I walk into places that I don't know, I feel like when someone's died in the apartment and that kind of thing. I avoid hospitals because I can feel hands touching me and I get goosebumps and really bad headaches. For example, I was looking for an apartment like a month ago with my mother. I like to hear her input into things. My mother is my best friend. So we walked into the apartment and automatically I got a pain in my stomach and I had a headache. My mother and I developed a language that only her and I can understand. I walked into the kitchen of the apartment and I told her, "Mom, a lot of people died here and I can't live here." So my mom decided to tell the realtor no thank you to the apartment. It's too big for her. The guy decided to reply, "Ma'am, this apartment is really cheap. The usual rent is $3,000 and now it's $1,600. I live in a New York City apartment." My mom, "Yeah, I understand, but no thank you." We were walking downstairs and a lady that lived in one apartment below the apartment that we were looking at came out of her door and said to my mom in Spanish, "Don't move in there. The family had died in there a month ago. He's not going to tell you that. Good night." Closed the door. The realtor said, "What did she say?" My mom replied, "She said, 'Welcome to the building. If you have any packages, I'll pick them up for you.'" She lied. So the realtor looked kind of weird. As we walked home, I told my mom what I told you. I'm not crazy. Another story. My sister, when she was 15, had a horrible habit of inviting friends over and they would sleep on the couch. So having odd people in my apartment wasn't odd to me. So one night I went out drinking with friends. Came back home, and as I was walking down the hallway, there was a guy that was standing up against the wall to let me pass to the bathroom. I said, "Yeah, excuse me, and good night." He replied with, "Sure, hon, go ahead." I went to the bathroom, closed the door, and as I was using the bathroom, I thought to myself, wait, no one is home. My sister's in Pennsylvania. My mom works overnight. Who the hell was that? I opened the door slowly and no one was there. I told my mom what happened next morning, and of course she went to tell the neighbor next door. So the neighbors told my mother. The couple that lived there, the boyfriend stabbed the other guy because he was cheating on him. Then the other guy killed himself in your daughter's room. My room. Creepy. Where did all that happen? Yeah, it happened in the hallway. So you get the point that I feel things and sometimes even see things that I can't explain. In the apartment that I live in right now, there's a shadow that likes to sit at the foot of my bed and just likes to watch me sleep. The reason I'm moving, by the way. You feel the weight at the foot of the bed. It just sits there and watches. The Salem Story. I went to visit my little sister's best friend. I need to take a break from the pandemic bullshit. I went to Boston while I was still safe to visit. My friend picked me up from the airport, and that was nice of her. Anywho, since I arrived in Boston super early in the morning, she decided that it would be nice for me to visit Salem, a small town. Very cute, by the way. Backstory. My sister and I have a thing that we would get our palm read by a psychic, or our cards read. The lady that we used to go to, she was a nice old lady. About to lose her sight, she would tell me stuff. At some point, it would seem like it was all bull, but oddly enough, everything that she said did come true. The last time I saw her, she said, "You have a good aura. You're so kind. You'd like to help people from your heart, and it's the biggest downfall. Don't worry. Other worldly people see that, and they love that about you." But back to the Salem story. So I went to this shop. Can't remember the name. It had a sort of witch stuff, dolls, potions, herbs, even candles to do some black magic. I don't believe in any of that stuff, personally, but to the people who do believe in it, I respect your beliefs. There was a sign that said, "Card reading. Please make an appointment." I looked around and there was an employee at the shop fixing some candles. He said, "Yeah, go to the cashier, make an appointment, and she can help you." I did make the appointment. The guy reads my cards. Says some odd stuff, but one thing that I can say that stood out is that he said that there's a lady that is with me at all times. I said, "Who?" He replied that she said that she is the lady with the roses. Lots of roses. My grandmother had a thing with roses. She had 3 gardens filled with roses, yellow, red, pink, you name it, she would have them. I told the guy my grandmother's nickname. He said, "Yes." She's shaking her head up and down. Okay, odd. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the reading because that's personal. After I left the shop, I was drained. I told her to take me home. So, about 1 p.m. or so, I need to sleep. And my sister's friend lives right across the cemetery. It looked really pretty and peaceful. In New York, the cemeteries look odd, and personally I feel like all the dead people are piled up on top of each other like there's no walking space. So I left the store uneased. Had a migraine that came out of nowhere right after I left the shop. I told my friend I had a headache, and mentally I was so drained that I don't really know what happened in that shop. I felt like I worked 36 hours straight, so I fell asleep and woke up in the middle of the night. I woke up to someone whispering in my ear really fast. Like when the commercial people are trying to read you the TRRs, that fast. I woke up and I couldn't move at all. I was stiff on my friend's daughter's bed. I started to pray mentally because I couldn't even move my mouth. The whisper just kept on getting faster and faster, so I did what my mother had told me. "Munchkin, when you feel like that, pray to your grandma. She's always with you in your heart." So I prayed to my grandmother, and I said, "Whoever's trying to communicate, stop it." The whisper stopped. I got up to get a drink of water downstairs. The house felt odd. I felt like someone was looking at me. I hate that feeling, so I ran up the stairs to get into bed again. Oddly enough, the shades started to move, like there's a wind coming into the bedroom. What the fuck? Felt cold. I fell asleep again though, but this time wearing a hoodie. Socks, too. the fuzzy kind. In the morning, I woke up and told my friend what happened. She said something that was odd. That room is always odd. It's always cold. It would be 100 degrees outside, and it's always cold. We had one of those guys, that tech guys, to come and check if there was a hole in the house or what. He said that the house is completely sealed, that the room shouldn't be that cold. I told her about the whisper, of course. She laughed it off. The next morning, I wanted to go back to the shop. I wanted to see the guy again. Because of the pandemic, there was a line, so a friend of mine just said that wait a bit online. But it was taking way too long. So I passed by the shop, and since its shop has windows that are pretty big, I passed by, and all the employees in that shop turned their heads to look at me. The card guy, the cashier, and the herb lady. They didn't have any customers waiting either. I looked back at them, and the card guy smiled, but it didn't seem normal. He looked really creepy, and his teeth didn't look normal at all. So guess what? When my mother said to never walk into places that people like to drain you, meaning energy-wise, I always thought my mom was a little superstitious, but she hasn't been wrong so far. Munchkin, they feel your light, your love, and other people want that. People who cannot see. So the question is, what am I? Story number 4. Tall, black, hooded shadow. My mother lives in a weird building. The basement is a little creepy because it's dark. You have to go into the basement to go throw out the garbage. So basically you take the elevator to the cellar. On your left-hand side, it's like a weird space where other tenants can store their stuff. And to your right is the laundry room. Keep on walking and there's a door that leads to the garbage room. So my daughter and I took the lift to the cellar. Right when we're getting out, I looked to the right and for a split second, I saw a really tall guy. Everyone is taller than me. I'm like 5 feet tall. Anyhow, my daughter had one bag and I had boxes on my hands. I saw the guy and I thought it was a tenant fixing his stuff, and possibly the cellar. My daughter and I kept on walking and I told her, "Hey, keep the door open, a guy's about to come out. Be nice." So my daughter looked back and no one was there at all. I told her, "Well, that's weird. There was a guy there with a black hoodie just standing there. He was breathing really hard too. I assumed he was lifting boxes and probably tired, because that's how it sounded." Question: did he take the elevator while we didn't look? Nope, because my sister called me right at that moment that I was talking to my daughter about the guy saying, "Hey, wait, I want to smoke a cigarette. Can you wait? I'm in the elevator." My mom lives at the 20th floor. So, yeah, there was a guy there, and I saw him. I don't know who he was, but my daughter says it was a shadow man. Don't know what that means, but I do know one thing. I can see things that I can't explain, and hear things that are odd. Whispers. Don't know who that guy was, but he looked really dingy looking. Story number 5. Who was that? So this morning I woke up to my phone dinging. I had a fraud charge on my card. I told myself, fine, this is how we're going to start this day. No worries, I got you. A few days ago I changed my curtains from lavender color to red. There was too much light coming in. Anyhow, my bed is right next to one of my windows, and I have a drawer thing for my clothes. So I'm calling my bank to talk about the stupid charge. I walked toward my kitchen to feed my cats. They were making too much noise, probably because they were hungry. So I walked back to my room and get some clothes to change and start my day. While I'm pulling out my bra, I see the shadow on my window, and I'm like, what the fucking creep is trying to look in at me? I share a room with my kid. I'm an adult in New York. Rent prices are not cheap, so I tell my kid, hey look, there's a man in the window. She got up and opened her eyes. This is the kid talking now. Mom, that's just the shape of a building. It's stupid. It's not a ghost. This is me. No, that can't be, because the houses are short. And who's going to be outside in this weather with only a t-shirt? This is the kid. Let me take a picture and look outside. It's probably an antenna. It's okay, Mom. Don't freak out. Just move the curtain. Me. Okay. So I moved the curtain, went to go get coffee, and came back to the room. My kid said, Mom, there's too much light close to the curtain. Then this happened. Hey, the shape is gone. Kid. What the fuck? Mom, now this is creepy. I moved the curtain again and again. Maybe there's a stain from a fabric softener or something. Nope. So now I'm working from home and I'm shaking. My kid keeps on walking in and out of the room to the living room. I knew there was something in this apartment. My first-hand ghost experience. This all begins about 19 years ago. The house that my parents first moved into was originally an old church, but was remodeled into being a house. Not much of the old church was left in the house, minus the wood flooring in the den. Now apparently my parents had heard choir music, the sounds of boots on hardwood floors, and had even seen a shadow figure once. But as for what happened to me, my parents were trying to move me from sleeping in their bedroom to my own bedroom. But for some reason, I wouldn't do it. My only reason being, I was scared to. So my mom asked me, why do you sleep scared in your own room? Do you need a nightlight, maybe? And apparently I said, and I quote, because of the tall, dark man in the corner over there. Then apparently I pointed over to the corner of the room where, surprise, surprise, no one was. A few other things happened in that house, but none to me personally. If there is interest, I can make a separate post on it, though. Fast forward a few years, and we're at our second house. Now, this is where shit starts to get crazy. I feel like I should preface this by saying that there is a room in my house. We'll just call it the den. Since day one of being in this house, I never liked that room. I felt like I was being watched every time I was alone in there. So I did everything in my power to stay out of that room. I still do, even to this day. The first incident was when I was no older than 9 or 10. It was the last day of school for me and my little brother Mark. Me, my mom, and Mark were at our house. Mark realized he left his towel at school and needed to go back and get it. My mom then turns to me and said, "Are you okay staying at the house for 10 minutes while we go back up to the school and get it?" I said I was. The school is less than a mile from where we were at. A few minutes after they left, I was sitting in the living room and I start to hear my mom and Mark talking to my mother in their bathroom. Even though I'm completely home alone, I then hear them start to laugh. Then it stops, and everything was quiet. A few minutes later, my mom and Mark walked back into the house. However, 10-year-old me didn't even bother to mention it for some reason. A few years go by until the next incident. Now, before we keep going, I need to explain two things, dear reader. First thing, I need to tell you that personally, I am very much a night owl. Staying up to 3 or 4 in the morning is nothing new to me. The second thing, in my house, there's a hallway. At one end is the front door, and at the other end is the back door. Now, this hallway has 4 doorways and entryways. The den, the office, the kitchen, and my parents' room. The kitchen has a bar, so you're able to see the whole living room and into my parents' room, if their door is open. And then further up next to the front door is the den. This next story takes place a few months ago, around 2-ish at night. I'm standing in the kitchen washing dishes. And as I'm doing so, I hear 2 things crystal fucking clear coming from the den down the hallway. I hear an old man go, "Shh," followed by a little girl giggling. I freeze in the middle of what I'm doing. I'm the only person awake right now, and I don't have a little sister, and both Mark and my dad are asleep. I am the only person awake. Now at this point, I'm panicking on the inside. However, I'm trying to keep my composure on the outside, turn off the water in the sink and walk to my parents' bedroom. I then shake my dad awake and say, "Is there anyone else in this house besides me, you, and Mark?" He simply said, "No, there isn't," and just falls back asleep. Annoyed, I walked out of my parents' room and immediately looking down the hallway, right towards the den, and there's nothing at all, just like there should be. I sigh and I go back to doing dishes because ghost or no ghost, I still have chores that need to be done. The next night, again, same story. I'm doing dishes. Now, something to note. I had just stood up and in my shorts slipped a bit and I pulled them back up. So now the front half of my shirt is untucked, while the back half of my shirt is tucked into my shorts. As I'm washing dishes, I feel something grab the back of my shirt and pop it. Very similar to the way your mom would grab you and fix your shirt by popping and pulling it out of your pants and shorts. And surprise, surprise, that's just what the fucking ghost did. Untucked my shirt from the back of my shorts. I just simply ignore it and keep doing dishes. But again, inside, I'm extremely terrified. One other incident I forgot to mention. Next to the den, there's a room. We just simply call it the office, like I said above. There's a few things in this room. 2 recliners, the family computer, a mini fridge, and most importantly of all, the router. Now again, it's about 1-ish at night, and the Wi-Fi is being extremely slow for some reason. I groan, get up, and head into the office. Now again, the office and the den are right next to each other, so I never like to go in the office alone, or especially at night. But tonight, I had to. So I go into the office, go to the router, press the reset button, and then sit down on one of the 2 recliners that we have in there while I'm waiting for the Wi-Fi to reset. Now, the office door, usually a twin set of doors, that both open the same way, by the way. So there's a small gap between them. And where does that small gap look into? Right into that damn den. So I'm sitting there, and I can't shake this feeling that I'm being stared at, like 2 eyes are looking at me and burrowing into my very soul. I shake my head and try to ignore the feeling. After the Wi-Fi box resets, I head back to my room and lay down on my bed. And that's when I feel it, a red-hot burning pain on my hand. I look down at my hand and there are 3 bright red scratch marks on it. Fast forward a few months. Nothing happens, just the same old feeling that you're being watched. Wherever you go. Until one night, the metaphorical damn final burst. I'm heading to bed. Now this involves making sure that the front and back door are both locked. So first thing I check the front door. It's locked, so I walk down the hallway, reach the back door, and then lock it. I then turn around and I see half a person walking into my den. The lower half. It cuts off right at the waist. Now this person was completely see-through and sort of gray, like the ghost in the Harry Potter movies. So I stand there for a few seconds in pure disbelief at what I just was seeing. I then very quickly walk to my room and shut the door behind me, because everyone clearly knows that ghosts can't follow you into your room, right? The most recent incident was last month. This time, I was not the only person awake. However, I was the only person in the house. My dad was out in the garage working, so I'm standing in the kitchen eating a sandwich. It's important to note as well, my parents' door was open in this story. So I look up from my food for a second, and I see again half a person standing in my parents' room. But this time it's the top half. I look back down at my food. It's only about half of a second that my brain processed what the hell I just saw. I then quickly look back up and into my parents' room, and there's nothing. No one was there. Now, here we are, in the present day. Nothing new has happened as of late. However, the feeling of being watched at night grows stronger by the day. It's actually gotten to the point where I don't like to be out in the kitchen or anything at night. Also, before anyone asks, no, I am not the only person who's experienced stuff. But my parents and Mark, they have as well. Anyways. Story number 7. My First-Hand Ghost Experience, Part 2. This first story takes place over 20 years ago. Back whenever I was only a newborn. My mom was laying in one of our recliners. I was on her chest. As she was laying there, she suddenly felt something very, very heavy start pushing her downwards into the recliner, making it so she couldn't breathe. My dad at the time was at work, so she was the only one home. My mom, being a woman of religion, began in her head to call out to God, begging for him to protect me. As soon as she did, it stopped. She then quickly got up, took me, and left the house. During the next few years, a series of small things happened. That being my mom and dad both hearing choir music as well as loud, heavy boot footsteps coming from outside their bedroom. Again, this happened multiple times. One other small thing that happened. My mom was doing laundry. This is probably around 2006. I'm up the road hanging out with a friend of mine. Mark hasn't been born yet, and my dad is at work. Our dryer had this little sort of piece of metal sticking out of it. The point of this was so the dryer door would stay shut. There's no way to open that drawer without forcefully pulling on it to open. My mom, who's once again home alone by herself, realized that her dryer was done. So she stops whatever she was doing at the time and goes to get the clothes out of the dryer. Only to then see the dryer door is hanging wide open. Something opened it. My mom's in the heat of the moment and just said, "I'm not making this up." "Well, the least you could have done was fold the damn things," before quickly leaving the house. The next big thing that happened, it was late at night, probably around 11 or 12 a.m. Midnight. My dad was going to bed, and as he was laying down in bed, he saw a dark, shadowy figure standing at the foot. This was at the foot of he and my mom's bed. According to my dad, he then proceeded to run around and roundhouse kick the box fan that he had into the bathroom and grabbed his handgun and pointed it at where the figure was. However, by the time that he had the gun pointed at where the figure was, it was gone, and this all happened within 5 seconds. My poor mother, who was asleep at this time, woke up to the sound of a box fan flying into the bathroom and a gun being cocked. The house was then put up for sale a week later. The last thing of interest that happened in that house, I told in my other post. However, I'm going to tell it here again. My parents were trying to move me from sleeping in their bedroom to my own bedroom, but for some reason I wouldn't do it. My only reason being that I was scared to, so my mom asked me, "Why are you scared to sleep in your own room? Do you need a nightlight maybe?" And apparently I said, and I quote, "Because the tall dark man in the corner over there." Then apparently I pointed over to the corner of my room where, surprise, surprise, no one was. Fast forward once again, and we're in the current house I live at. Sorry guys, I'm abbreviating because this seems like a repeat. I have a question for you, dear reader. Have you ever walked into an empty room, the second that you walked in you knew something was just off? I can't explain what it is other than a feeling of being watched. I ask only because this is a room that's just in my current house, and we'll call it the den. I remember the very first day I was in the house, I felt like I was being watched. Like there was someone just out of sight staring at me. Even to this day, over 10 years later, I still get this feeling. I avoid the room at all costs, and I hate stepping foot in there. Yada, yada, yada. This is a direct repeat. I'm so sorry, people who are listening. Scrolling down. The first story from this house was about 5 months ago. I was standing in the kitchen doing dishes and cleaning the counters. Probably 2 in the morning. As I'm in the middle of doing the dishes, I suddenly hear 2 very loud bangings coming from right behind me in the den. It was as if a grown man took his fist and hit them against the wall full force. After a few seconds, it starts up again. However, this time, much closer. It's in the central hallway right next to me, and again it sounds like someone is just banging on the walls over and over with their fist as hard as they can. It's so forceful, I'm able to take a few pictures that we have on the wall shaking. I very quickly grab my phone and I run full speed into my bedroom, closing the door behind me. All the while, the banging is still going on. A few days later, once again, I'm in the kitchen doing my chores, and suddenly there is a low, deep growling sound coming from the den. It was deeper than any human could ever make. After the growl, there was one loud bang on the wall next to me. I quickly went back to my room, and as I'm in there, I hear stuff very clearly being knocked down in the kitchen, where I was just at. After a few minutes, the noise finally stops. A few minutes later, I stepped out of my room and looked toward the kitchen, where I saw 2 pans laying on the kitchen floor, as well as multiple kitchen drawers having been opened that were previously shut, as well as the pantry door, which was previously open, is also now shut. This will be the final story that personally happened to me. However, it's something that's definitely happened multiple times. One night, I'm laying in bed, when I suddenly feel something get into the bed with me. Now, my first thought is, oh, it's just my cat. Then I remember, wait, no, the cats are outside. Plus, that was far too heavy to be a cat. I very quickly grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and looked to where I felt the bed move at, where there is nothing. I shrug it off as maybe it's just me being too tired. Maybe I'm imagining things. At least that's what I thought. Until it happened again a few minutes later. This time, when I shined my flashlight, I actually saw the bed sinking down a little bit, like a person was sitting on the edge of my bed. Right as I noticed it, it went back to normal, as if the person just got up and left the bed. Fast forward to the next night. Same thing. I'm in bed by myself, and I feel like something's about to crawl into bed next to me. I turn and look, and again, nothing. This happened for multiple nights in a row. This also didn't happen to just me. My mom and dad have both experienced the same thing. An experience where it's as if someone is trying to sit on their bed, even though they were alone at the time. Speaking of my mom, these last 2 stories focus on her. These are very short stories, too. One day, as she was sitting in the living room by herself, she set down her reading glasses to grab a stronger pair. As she was in the middle of putting on her new glasses, the ones she just set down on the table go flying across the living room. She described it like someone swatted them off the table and across the living room. This last story takes place almost a year ago. My mom came home from work one night. Everyone was asleep, and she heard a female voice come from me and Mark's bathroom. The voice just said, "Hello?" She stopped, said hello back, and asked who was in there. When there was no reply, she turned on the bathroom light to find that there was no one in there. Story number 8. Ask Reddit. The house I grew up in was more what you would call haunted. You could hear footsteps pace back and forth on the wooden floors upstairs. You'd hear knocks on the floor ceilings and walls. Many other things. It happened so many times that it went from being absolutely terrifying to just scary. I got older and the activity died down to the point that ghostly happenings rarely even happened. Then in my 20s, Fred and I tried out a Ouija board in the upstairs. The creepiest place in the entire house. I'd used the board a good bit, but I guess I seemed skeptical but still open-minded at the same time. I didn't think we'd have any trouble getting it to work though. Sure enough, the thing doesn't move an inch. For a good 2 hours straight, we kept asking questions. I feel kind of like an idiot, so we end up taking out a tape recorder and playing the board again, asking questions and downloading them onto the computer so we could use filters and whatnot to see if we got a voice. We did this for hours, and again, nothing. We completely give up on the board, turn the recorder off. We're having a sort of post-game talk about whether the board really can contact spirits and so on and so forth. We end up on the subject of whether there's a God or not, and in the space between him and I, slightly to my right, in the same space someone's voice would have sounded like if they'd been sitting there at the table with us, we heard a male voice laugh, like it could no longer contain its laughter, like it had been trying to contain itself. It was very quick, very loud, and clear as day. It was maybe 5 ha's in a second's time. I know I'm not doing a great job at explaining this, but it sounded very condescending, like a rich snob might laugh at a peasant in some Disney movie. My friend stopped mid-sentence and with his eyes wide. I made him tell what he had heard before, and I would tell him, and he had just heard a laugh and sort of did one to demonstrate what he thought it sounded like. It was exactly what I had heard. The reason I'm sharing this particular story is because to this day I can dismiss everything that I heard and saw, everything my mom and sister described to me, every single thing except the experiences I shared with other people. I haven't had a paranormal experience since, and my mom sold the house 7 or 8 years ago. I can see why people don't believe. I barely believe some of the craziest things that happened in that house. But I can't dismiss shared experiences, and I also can't dismiss separate people telling me that they've experienced the same things. So many stories and similarities over such a long period of time. Story number 9. Smoke behind my back. So hey, maybe it's just my mental illness or something completely different. But I was walking around in my house to get some water, and when I turned off the light, kind of felt watched. What I feel like quiet sometimes. So I looked behind me and I actually saw like gray smoke behind me, and it just vanished in seconds. I thought it was from a candle. Maybe I was just walking nearby and blew it out, but it's still burning. I should mention that this wasn't the first encounter with something like that. I often feel like being watched, being touched for some reason, like my hand resting on or under my right shoulder. And the most scary thing that freaked me out so far was a doppelganger in the reflection of the mirror. It was like myself, smiling at me. At first I felt kind of strange because he, my reflection, smiled, so I thought that that was odd since I didn't even realize that I smiled, but then I noticed it had a completely different t-shirt on. The color was blue and I had black on. I just ran away from the mirror as soon as possible, freaked the shit out, but my mind keeps telling me that this doesn't make sense. So I was going back upstairs, looking in the mirror, and he was still there. Repeated this like 3 to 4 times till I realized it was just a hat on the wall. I still feel strange about this encounter, since I really thought a hat was my doppelganger. I also don't really want to believe that this was only a hat, since I needed like multiple tries to understand that it's not real and I just saw a hat as a head with my face smiling at me. But when we talk about that smoke, no fucking clue, as I said. Thought it was the candle next to me, but it's still on and there wasn't any smoke over the candle itself. So maybe one of you has an explanation for this stuff. Maybe it's something that's attached itself to me, or I'm just going insane. I have to admit, I thought at first the touching was my grandfather, since it started a few months after he had died. What I can tell you, sir, is sometimes candles will smoke and then stop smoking if there's something wrong with that wick. Story number 10. The Pocono Mountain Skinwalker. Every summer since I was 6, starting in 2012, I've gone to a sleepaway camp up in the Poconos. The camp was around 5,000 kids at the time and had a relatively good reputation. This previous summer, being 2022, I encountered what I believe was a skinwalker, something of that type. For some backstory, many really bad things have happened at that camp in the past 5 years. My skate instructor got kicked out and was sent to an asylum for going quote-unquote insane. The owner saw something in the street and crashed into a tree where he cracked his entire skull in half. There were also demonic symbols carved into the burn pit. They weren't able to figure out who did it, but just assumed it was kids trying to be edgy or counselors trying to mess with each other. But basically, aside from these creepy things, it's a normal camp. Kids do dumb shit like smoke weed, sneak out, hook up, whatever. But a pretty normal experience. So it was my final summer at camp, so I decided to make it worth it. I was going to sneak out as much as possible. So most people just wanted to sleep, so the first few nights I would just sneak out alone and go to this tiny pavilion at the top of the camp for phone reception. There was a tiny path through the woods behind my cabin that was basically abandoned, but it was a really quick way up to the upper field, and I wouldn't have to worry about getting caught, since it's above main camp. For 3 nights in a row, I walked up there, and the best way to explain the feeling of walking in the wooded part every night was an impending feeling of doom. I just felt like I was being watched and like I was going to die, but being the rational person that I try to be, I would say to myself, of course it feels like you're being watched. There's animals and bears, all that. So I continued, and on the 3rd night, as I was walking, I genuinely felt a sense that I was going to die. I got up to the pavilion, which is on a flat field, and stayed there with my flashlight on. That was until sunrise, and eventually made my way back down to the cabin. The next night, these 2 guys invited my friend and I to go smoke. So it's 2:30 a.m. and we got ready and headed out. I felt much better having a friend with me, and as we were joking around and overall excited, I thought I was just being paranoid. We make our way down to the canteen, which is just a large, wide, empty hallway with booths lining one side and arcade machines lining the other. It is pitch black, and since we don't have any service, we assumed that they may be in the bathroom, which is located at the back of the corridor. As we make our way back, we see a black figure at the end of the hallway, which is an open half wall to the outside. We scream, half jokingly, and the figure just stays put. We start yelling, "Who is it? Come on!" assuming that it was a counselor or the guys. We move closer, maybe 7-ish feet now, and shine our flashlights on the figure, and it runs into the bathroom. We wait outside the bathroom for 10 minutes, confused as to why we haven't heard a toilet flush or giggling, trying to figure out who's in there and why they're being so secretive about it. Note: the bathroom has no windows and no way out, other than the door that we're now standing outside of. So we wait as we're holding our breath, trying to hear any sound of life, like breathing footsteps, but there's nothing. Eventually, after 15 minutes, we count down from 3 and tell them to pull their pants up, jokingly, because we're coming in. We go in and there's no one in there, no sign that anyone could have been there. My friend and I look at each other, obviously weirded out, not wanting to say anything, and my friend, who's the furthest from believing any sort of supernatural stuff, just told me to run and not look back. When we get back up to the cabin, we go to the bathroom and close the door. I ask her why we had to run and joke about how someone was just probably trying to mess with us. She looks at me more scared than I ever would have thought. And to see her, she says, if we put our flashlights on it, why is it still pitch black? I couldn't see any clothing or features or anything other than just the outline of a person. I think about this too and smile and say, we should have probably just head to bed. I wasn't able to sleep all night, and all I could think about was that it better have been my mind playing tricks on me, whether from being in the dark or from being tired. Like how you see shadows out of the corner of your eye when you haven't slept in a while. Story number 11. Pocono Mountain Skinwalker, Part 2. Hoping this was an isolated incident, I go around camp joking that last night my friend and I saw a skinwalker. Everyone brushed it off, except for the senior staff members. People who've probably been there 10 plus years, and the owner. They just looked at me, but not like I was crazy, or smoking too much pot like the other people, but like they were genuinely scared. This brings me back to another aspect. When I was younger, people would go treasure hunting in the woods, with metal detectors, shovels, you name it. Mark, the owner of the camp, claims back in the 80s, a kid took something that had belonged to the camp since the 50s and locked it in a little black box, and that if anyone can locate the box, he will give them $5,000 as a prize. I always thought it was a myth that he entertains to see everybody mess around, but that was disproven. My hopes that the sighting would be an isolated incident were also wrong. Weird shit kept happening. I started to begin a sort of romance with the guy, and as we were stargazing, we heard just genuinely unexplainable noises and little flashes of light in the sky above us. Not too weird, though. But then one night, when we were on our way back from the upper fields, as we crossed a flat plain of land that ends with maybe a 6-foot drop, as we were walking, we saw a black figure with white eyes, head and shoulders looking at us from the drop. The boy, who we will call Ben, dropped to the ground and brought me down with him. He had us lay flat in the field, and we both were just terrified. This is when I knew that it wasn't a delusion or anything like that, because how could we both possibly react to something at the same time? We looked up and see it hiding behind a bush about a foot away from where we had just seen it. We stood up after about 30 seconds and moved forward, hoping to see a person, or even a bear. That would be more comforting. We run down the same hill that we saw it, and continue to run the same direction. He turns to it, attempting to assert dominance or something dumb from a movie, and of course, I turn around with him. The creature is about 7 feet tall, just like pure black, no features whatsoever. It stares directly back at us, with white eyes. Not piercing, almost just like they were little holes poked in a black sheet. At this point, I start sobbing, saying, we're gonna die, this is not human, we're gonna die. We continue to speed walk backwards while facing the creature, and the creature bends down where there is a little black shadow box, and just goes in and poof, it's gone. My theory is it's the same box that the owner has hunted down for, but that could be a stretch. But basically, with still a terrible feeling of impending doom and I'm sobbing, Ben comforts me, just repeating, "It was just a bunny, it was just a bunny, it was just a bunny." This went on for a long time. It seemed like he was saying it was more to himself than me. I tried to say there's no way it was a bunny, but every time I started the sentence, he would look at me and say, "I know, but we have to just keep walking." He came back to our cabin since he didn't want to walk alone after this, and slept in the bathroom until the sun came up and ran back to his cabin without being caught. The morning after, I tried talking to him, and he was just so out of it. I talked to the friend that he had come to camp with, and he said that they had a similar experience to the first one I had, but they also brushed it off. As it was my last year at the camp, I decided it makes more sense to rationalize the impossible than to spend every night while at my cabin, while they're out having fun thinking about this. Story number 12, Pocono Mountain Skinwalker, Part 3. Sadly, these encounters didn't end. It almost became a normal thing, as mentally toiling as it was from me and my friend. Two boys that had just made it clear that night that we must stay in lighted areas and never be in a group of less than 3 people. Even so, we still saw it. When Ben and Tyrell were out with another boy, they all saw it. Of course, Ben told me, and I asked the other guy about it, happy to know that I wasn't just going insane. He started crying, saying that it was just his imagination and to stop turning into a big thing. He didn't go out he didn't go out at night at all after that. All the sightings at any point past the first 2 nights seemed to blend together. I would just walk quickly inside if I saw it and make sure to stay facing it. The boy Ben brought a switchblade, and another night as we were out stargazing, where there was a street lamp center camp, we saw it again. He pulled out the switchblade, which I thought was idiotic, and the spring that made it flip out broke, and it wouldn't come out. And it was just staring at us again. At this point, I knew that I should not be going out at night, but in a really childish way, I was thinking of it as a mystery, like I needed to solve it, like I was chosen. So I went out alone, even though every bone in my body was telling me not to, and I went into the woods with my flashlight, a cross, not even religious, and was hoping to get answers. Maybe, or if I didn't see it, maybe even after everything I would be able to brush it off. But sadly, I did see it. After waiting in the forest that I originally walked through with my flashlight and yelling to keep away bears, I turned my flashlight off, said a prayer I remembered from when I was younger, and went silent. 5 minutes went by, nothing. At this point, I was about to piss myself as I reached for my flashlight. I saw it again, black figure piercing white eyes, not doing anything or really even moving, just watching. I walked back to the cabin saying the prayers, and although I know for a fact that it was following me for some time, since I could sense it, I realize I sound crazy, but if you were there, you would know. And eventually the feeling wore off. Ben claims to have seen it with red eyes at one point as he was playing Alpha, or whatever it could be. As if it could be a physical thing he could fight with adrenaline. He's an aspiring boxer, apparently, but never had any physical encounters, only that feeling of death. The camp often mocks Native American culture, and from my research is located on Lenape land. I have no idea as to if any of this stuff is related, but it also is the closest camp to the Delaware River, which a lot of skinwalker stories stem from. I know this sounds kind of fake, but truly, I am just trying to process it so I can forget it. I called the boy Ben many times, begging to him to talk about it, but he refused and wouldn't let me bring it up. I'm almost about to call one of those paranormal investigation shows, but I don't want to seem crazy. The amount of people that ended up seeing it, even with no knowledge of Ben and I's experiences, proves to me something has been going on there. Something else worth mentioning, though, is that one of the senior staff members, a 30-year-old man, heard about what happened, and he brought us sea salt and told us to line our cabins and to not go out, specifically at night, ever again, unless he's on night watch. He has a gun. I really want to justify it as mass hysteria, lack of sleep, or something like that, but I know that couldn't have been it. If anyone has any other information on what could have happened, please contact me on here and I'll send you my info. I don't understand what it was, why it didn't attack us, kill us, why none of the other groups came across it other than ours and some adults. It just messes with my head terribly. Story number 13. Flashing lights and scary sounds. While away at sleepaway camp, I had a paranormal experience that began with seeing odd flashes of light in the sky. And then while out in the woods at night, and even in an open field, I had multiple encounters with a 7-foot-tall, all-black figure. Occasionally had white eyes. And someone else who's been there with me when he attempted to pull out a switchblade claims it has red eyes, although I'm not sure how true this is. This creature stalked myself and 2 other campers, and even a counselor who helped us through this. I only came across it while walking outside at night. I thought I was crazy, of course, but even in the full moon, when you would be able to see details, it was still very obviously inhuman. I would watch from so far away occasionally, and if we would stop and stare or even notice its presence, it would hide itself behind trees, bushes, all that kind of thing most of the time. And the all-black figure was still very much visible when it was hiding even, and at least I could always feel like I was being watched. This all happened about a year ago, and it basically drove me to my breaking point. I've contacted the other people who saw it several times, begging them to tell me the truth of what happened so I could just come to the conclusion that I'm not insane, and what I saw was perhaps not real. At this point in time, I've distanced myself from them completely, and I text them only occasionally. In a lot of ways, it just felt like a weird camp thing. A lot less scary when you're not in the moment. Tonight, while looking out the window of my house, I closed the blinds, and as I'm doing so, I saw random flashes of light again. It isn't hot enough for it to be heat flashes, and I haven't seen anything like that since last summer. To be honest, I want to cry. I was trying to be reasonable and consider the fact that nothing like this has happened in a year, so why would it happen now? Also, considering I'm at my house inside, 4 hours away from when I saw stuff like that. I basically brushed it off and was completely fine, until I heard deep, raspy groans. I don't know how to explain it, but it sounded like a really bad imitation of a cow. Definitely scarier. I tried to ignore it, considering that it maybe could just be normal sounds from the woods surrounding my house. But it was getting closer to the point that I knew it had to be coming from my backyard. I learned the hard way that curiosity killed the cat, so I locked my windows and put down the blinds, but I was just wondering if I should be more concerned about this. This took place in the past hour, and I'm just very concerned that this stuff keeps happening. I'm not very superstitious. And maybe I'm just attracted to the unknown, but tonight? Why? I was just chilling in bed and it's like begging for my attention.